Today, we're going to apply the same concepts and tools that we used in the previous episode of issue identification and analysis. If you missed that video, click down below, take a moment to review the video, and then come right back. This will be a real-life case study of issue identification and analysis. Now, in this case, it's really important that I say two things. One, I'm not a lawyer. And two, I was not brought in to be a lawyer. I was brought in to come up with a strategy and a campaign plan. And that's exactly what I did. Let's dive right in. So we're going to call this case study When Jail Abuse and Medical Neglect Intersect. So here's the incident. Let's see if you can find the symptoms and the root cause. A middle-aged male held in the prone position on the ground with multiple correction officers on his back. This male, being held by correctional officers, is a pretrial detainee laying on the ground for an extended period of time in a prone position. This resulted in the detainee going into cardiac arrest, which resulted in a fatality. The reports say that the detainee was not following direct orders and was taking actions to cause himself bodily harm. Now, let's go through the symptoms. Belligerent detainee, failed to follow orders, restrained, continued to resist, placed in prone position, continued to resist, cardiac arrest, resulting in a fatality. What's the root cause? Detainee misconduct, resulting in a lawful use of force. If you followed this logic, the only question left was determining whether the use of force was acceptable. And you may ask yourself, why didn't the lawyers just proceed with an excessive force case? Here's why. That state has a principle called qualified immunity. So, qualified immunity, it shields the officers from liability in excessive force cases unless they violate clearly established law. This makes it notoriously difficult for plaintiffs to survive summary judgments or dismissals early on in the case. So, they called strategists to come up with another plan. Once the strategists came in, we looked at the symptoms, the root cause, and we had a lot of questions. But before we got any further, we decided to use our tools for issue identification, research, and the 5 whys. Lucky for us, the research led to immediate breakthroughs. Initially, we found a pattern of high incidence of serious injuries and some fatalities of pretrial detainees across the U.S. We also found a high incidence of pretrial detainees with pre-existing mental illness not receiving care in pretrial detention centers. We even found help from the DA in this particular county and counties across the country, noticing a high influx of persons with mental illness going into the criminal justice system, and there was little resources to help with this problem. Our research began showing what could be a possible epidemic. There was a rising number of individuals in America with mental illness, and reports were showing that possibly 50% of Americans in their lifetime would suffer from a mental health episode. With more research, we even got help from those we thought would be opposition. For example, correctional staff working in this facility and facilities around the country, even those who are working on the night in question, report it being understaffed and not properly trained to deal with detainees with mental illness. We also had an opportunity to speak to medical practitioners who were interestingly not hired by the county, but were hired by third-party contractors. And we also learned, allegedly, a lot of the regulations, policies, and procedures were not followed. So now it was time to do a real brainstorm. We wanted to know everything we could about the detainee, the arrest, and everything that led up to the incident. The detainee was found in an international airport past security checkpoint in a sterile area with a boarding pass. The detainee had a long history of mental illness, and there were reports that the arresting officer noticed and reported mental episodes en route to the jail facility. Despite his mental illness, the detainee had a family and a community that loved and cared for him. And upon further review, this detainee had been at this facility and was treated in the past for mental health. And it was also noted the detainee had a mental health episode en route to the facility, but also had another episode prior to his arraignment. Yet, it's unclear if the detainee received any mental health treatment or being transported to a mental health facility. And the detainee was not housed in a mental health unit that was staffed by mental health personnel. And the detainee was housed on a floor above the level consistent with a person with his condition. The research phase was a real breakthrough, to say the least. And as you'll see, the 5 whys test became very specific and began to show that this wasn't your typical excessive force case. Rather, it began to show that there were some real systemic healthcare failures, particularly with persons with mental illness and other healthcare conditions being housed in pretrial detention centers. For now, let's complete the analysis and go through the 5 whys. Number 1, if you knew or should have known that the detainee was having a mental health episode prior to arriving to the facility, why was the detainee not taken to a hospital, to a medical provider, or to a community-based facility? Answer: due to the lack of funding, persons with mental illness are being held in pretrial detention centers. Question number 2. Why, if these facilities are holding pretrial detainees, why are there no records of medical examinations or treatments being provided to this patient or others similarly situated? Response: allegedly, resources and staffing are often unavailable, in this case for this patient and others similarly situated. Question number 3. Even without a medical exam, the detainee had a history of mental illness. Why was he not provided adequate care? Response: allegedly, like many persons, this detainee had public insurance, and when they enter into the jail facilities, their public insurance is cut off. Therefore, we're not able to see those records. So there's an issue of continuity of care here. Follow-up question. But wasn't the detainee having reports of mental illness episodes in the facility? Why wasn't he given adequate care? Response: crickets, allegedly. Number 4, why would a facility house detainees with mental illness knowing they could not care for them? Response: allegedly. Jails are paid to house detainees at a set rate. It costs more to house detainees with illness. We don't make more money for housing detainees with illness. We just have to make it work. And number 5, if jails are recognizing that there is a high influx of detainees suffering from mental illness and other serious conditions, why aren't steps being made to care for them? Response: overcrowding understaffing and lack of training is a funding issue, allegedly. So after using our tools for issue identification and analysis, research, and the 5 whys, you can see how the root cause and the symptoms are quite different from what we originally thought. The new symptoms are a rising number of serious injuries and fatalities of detainees with mental illness in U.S. jails. And the root cause, patterns and practices of abuse due to overcrowding, understaffing, lack of training, and lack of funding. These attorneys approached us seeking a strategy to address an excessive force and/or wrongful death matter, trying to jump over a hurdle of qualified immunity. And with a careful analysis, now we're dealing with medical neglect and access of care. Since we were able to show that providing medical care in county detention centers was constitutionally protected and the failure to do so violated clear established laws, we overcame the qualified immunity defense. As you can imagine, the pathway to address a national pattern and practice medical neglect claim is totally different from litigating an excessive force case. And as you'll soon learn as we get to step number 2 in effective campaign, what you hope to achieve, where you outline goals and objectives, this case and many others like it lead the strategists and the attorneys to a fork in the road. And this just doesn't apply to legal cases. In any effective campaign, once you identify the issue, your mission, your objectives, or what you hope to achieve must be in line, or your campaign will be ineffective. I hope this case study afforded you an opportunity to use the concepts and tools for issue identification in practice. Make sure to give me a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to Lima Delta Bravo JD. In addition to the feedback, which I'll appreciate, it'll also give you an opportunity to be notified when we drop new content. Thank you for watching.